Bonjour, bonjour tout le monde. J'espère que tout le monde va bien.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is fine. Hope the first us of AFIS has been reached. So we thank each and every one of you for coming back so that we can discuss new business model for finance and how we can interact. And to start with, I'll call upon Mr. Rambert Nami, that is the Director of Business Consulting at Sofrecom, that will give us how the mobile money sector is and the banking sector. Good morning. So my mission is to introduce the next panel on this question of mobile money and digital payment with some leaders of the industry representing this activity. And to start with, I'll show you two things. Let us talk about how mobile money is going on in Africa and try to think about solutions in the sector, new services that will be emerging and new business opportunities. So, these are figures that you know already. There is the fact that 170 live services of mobile money and 620 million registered users. We have 20 and 30 active users making one transaction at least a month. We are going to 3 trillions of dollars. That is very huge. And in the context of pandemic, we have the matter of digitalization of uh, the use and the ratio that experts are looking at is a ratio uh, in when we try to compare the withdrawal and the deposit, and the withdrawal is much more than the deposit, showing that people are making use of the various payment means, and this is a trend that is being accelerated. Also in the context of the pandemic, we have a network of agents that is increasing, and we think that people will not go out and make transactions because of the COVID-19, but we still see that it is increasing about 3 million in Africa. That is almost the number of ATM we have around the world. That is very huge. Another very structuring item of the situation is the fintech. You're talking about 800 fintech. Some countries are dominating in. When you talk about the number of fintech, we have Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. And we see that when we take the operations in venture capitalists, we went from 3 million in 2017 to 6 million in 2021. There is doubling then the figures, and we have 200 million funds that were raised recently. Those are the few unicorns, and we are going to discuss the question with the Wave Society and another services that is working in terms of interoperability. There's MS Africa that has worked a lot in this domain. The last figure here for that concerns you that is coming from banks, we see that 50% of mobile money operators are proposing credit and savings. It's true that the service is not yet the highest when we talk about revenue generation, but we have doubled the number of uh, transaction flows among mobile money users. I think this is a growth, and it is improving. Now, talking about the evolution that I was talking about, the first is that the competition for mobile money operators that was reserved for telco operators because they were the one that initiated it. Safaricom in Kenya, and then MTN, Orange, and all the networks. In a context of the revenue that is decreasing, competition is much more increasing. We've seen fintech that I was talking about. We are going to make a focus on them. And we have the big techs also. We have initiatives that are being developed in Africa with Alipay, Chinese actors of Visa and MasterCard also. And we have new categories of competitors coming on the market very soon. On the case of Wave, that interests you. If you don't know Wave, it is a startup that is one of the unicorns that have raised 200 million recently, and they started the activities in Senegal and in Cote d'Ivoire and the Gambia with a deployment plan, and Togo is even concerned. Wave has done something very huge because they have transformed the business model completely. First, operators were gaining money on the cash out. There is the fees we take at the withdrawal, and Wave is putting in place zero cash out. And operators that are competing with Wave in Senegal have suffered a lot with this transformation because apart from losing ground on the market, they try to readjust on the pricing and the lost event revenue, sorry, based on the client. People were resisting more than the others. And in Togo, I was talking about the anticipation of the new pricing that will help to react better when wave will be coming. And this is bringing the question of diversification of revenues, the classic model of mobile money. There is revenue on cash out and money transfer is needs to evolve, and that is the helm of my introduction today. We must go toward a more diverse revenue collection model. And another evolution is the organizational evolution. Fintechs like Wave and others, they have uh, objectives of return that is different from the telco model. Telco have a very strict ratio with capex that are very highly controlled, and we see that this model is not that adapted to the evolution of fintech, and some operators like Airtel have started already to create the mobile money activity in a separate entity with an independent governance from the operator, and also they are putting in place a structure that will raise funds. And Airtel raised 500 million euro recently to accelerate its development of mobile money in the various operations in Africa. So those are changes that will make operators that are the leaders on the market that would like to accelerate and put means in place to help in the development of their mobile money activities. Another element of change making the transition with what I'm talking about, interoperability and mobile money. We know that it is a closed loop service that is reserved for the clients of the operators, and we need to be in MTN before we send money to another client that he has MTN SIM card. So it is a very closed loop, and we have a number of initiatives like industry led actors of mobile money try to connect bilaterally. East Africa is much more advanced on this topic, and it is helping to open up the network uh, between two operators. And now we have interoperability hub that are being created not on the basis of bilateral agreement. Those are hubs that are under most of the time the initiative of the regulator to build up a hub that will help not only two operators to come together for operations, but it will include all mobile money actors that are being extended to the financial services to help people do international transaction with their cards and be able to transform the closed loop model into the open ecosystem model that will help all the operators to get connected and validate the clients of mobile money users for them to have access to the new services of e-commerce that will help to pay on internet, to ease the payments, ease international transfer, give access to what is developed, that is marketplaces, a certain number of vertical uh, transaction that will help SMEs and agribusiness people to sell their inputs and all other things. So those are so many things that are taken into account in this kind of service that will help us give a new strength to mobile money being a financial inclusion service to the benefit of the population. So the flip side of this ecosystem is that we need to regulate all these. We have so many topics. Of course, when we talk about personal data that will come up, and all these system, their services of interoperability, and the data that we're going to collect with clients to score them and give them credits for a number of business objectives. It is very important that regulators take the dimension of this transformation on the protection of personal data. Another element is the protection of consumers. We see already that we are having difficulties on nano credit that are offered to large operations that are consumable credits. We are not in microfinance. This has only a business aim. When we give a microcredit to somebody for a business need or for personal needs, we have a certain number of regulations that need to be created to ease the development in good conditions when you talk about these new services. To finish, let me give you these projections or these estimates. Sorry. So here is the forecast for 2030 on the transformation of the mobile money business. That is a very limited to cash in, cash out and B2B, and go towards a new ecosystem with new realities. We have cash out, but not that much. We have credit, saving, and insurance having a huge potential for banks to build the partnership with mobile money actors to develop offers on the basis of clients and the topics on payments, be it online or on site, that show a very great potential. So we are on a market that of about $40 billion by 2030, and I think bankers here will be very interested in investing in this kind of market. So I give you the floor, Quentin.
Et merci pour cette présentation.
Well, thank you so much for this presentation. That set the stage. We're going to call on the panelists to come here on stage so that we can save time.
Alors, je vais vous présenter quand même avant.
Let me introduce the panelists. To my left, Mr. Jean-Louis Menan Kwame, he's the CEO of Orange Bank. Africa. Good morning, sir. Balai Koroma, you are the Director of Digital at EcoBank. And Tariq Boudiaf, you are the CEO of the Togocom, the telco. Thank you so much, Sia, for accepting to take part in this panel this morning. Let's get to the gist of the matter. Anamba made a presentation where the name of webs came across many times, and I have a very simple question to you, Umvalai, the first one to you, talking about fintech, low-cost fintech, right away and wave. I wonder, now that this startup has come an electronic money issuer, can this be a threat for you and for the classical banks? First, let me laugh because, I think that the real threats for the bank will be to our ability or inability to transform our business so that we can meet the expectations of the customer, because the expectation of the customers have evolved with technology, with a new group of consumer that is even more open to technology. It is important for us as banks, as financial institutions, to transform ourselves so that we can meet the expectation of those clients. The fintechs, Wave, or any other fintech that they may be, to me, are an opportunity for the banks. The first thing is that we have access to a segment of the market that so far we cannot serve effectively because we did not have the platform and the model. The telcos or the fintechs give us access to these segment of the market, which is number one. Number two, we are compelled due to the nature of technology and consumers to be more innovative. So we have more innovative products that can help us to tap into those segments. It is more an opportunity than a threat. If this is an opportunity, then it can be a threat for the telcos, just like the one you are managing, Tariq. Do you think that Wave today, they are alone and that they can be an inspiration or inspirational for some other project developers that will establish those kind of business based on the same business model? No, as we consider the momentum of the mobile money at this time, we realize that there is a level of maturity that is diverse across Africa, depending on the pioneers in Eastern Africa, where they have a very more advanced level of maturity as compared to Central Africa, to Southern Africa or Western Africa. I do think that today, well, the revolution, the mobile money revolution, is a work in progress. So we always have opportunities and they are evolving, and we not talk much about that. The mobile money that started in Africa is revolutionizing the world. We talk a lot. We have penetration rates that are very low outside Africa, but the mobile money is really moving outside Africa. So there is always an opportunity, which means that there will always be some stakeholders that are going to get engaged in these dynamic. So, but the flip side, or on the other side, I can say that the real issue here is regarding regulation. Regulation. How can we, as those contributing this segment, how can we work together? We know it very well. The telcos operators, they are generating those services. They're also generating the buoyancy of the market regarding other penetration and more customer potential that we can see in the future. So we're working on investment, for which we're developing some coverage to reach out to more people, technology, education as well. So clearly there's always a potential, but the questions boils down on how can we work together, and regulations will come in later. I just want to continue, and we know that to get out of the price, like GSMA and the telcos, they want stakeholders to have more and more sophisticated services. I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Kwame Jean-Louis, you can explain to me during when we were preparing this panel. You told me that Orange Bank, you're working to increasing or diversifying your offers with more stakeholders. Can you elaborate a little bit on this experience, sir? Yes. Well, thank you so much. Maybe before I take that one, let me say a few things on the previous question that you put. I think that we should not present things just like a stakeholder that is a threat to other one. In this business, what the client wants is important. What the regulators allow us to do, what technology can allow us to do, and what the shareholders want, which is the return on investment for the banks. When we can answer those four questions, there we go. And competition, it is the day-to-day share of any activity of any industry, so no one is threatening the other one. There is complementarity that is coming out, and customers at the end of the day that we need to meet their expectations, and which is the most important instrumental aspect for me. Now let me take you back on the stakeholders, the question on the stakeholders. A bank like Orange Bank, I may say that, let me say a few words on that. Maybe Orange Bank, what is it about? It's the digital bank, and our aim is to give loans and collecting savings of the clients that are already clients of Orange Money, and those loans on the savings that we're collecting, we're doing that through our wallet, the wallet which is the crucial element for transaction. The loans is 5,000 to 500,000 loans CFA francs, and we are equipped to give loans up to 1 million, 2 million of CFA francs by next year, and this will be the ability to give instant loans across the country in Cote d'Ivoire to any customer that will apply for such a loan through a scoring system. I'd like to acknowledge here in this room President Diago, who is the CEO, who is a shareholder of Orange Bank, and CEO from NCR. So as we developing Orange Bank, we need that to meet the expectations of the client. I said it, and in various areas we collaborated with fintechs or stakeholders like fintechs. For instance, the e-signing, which is a requirement of the Commission Bancaire, which is the regulator. We work together with external service providers, so we have a very wonderful DKBS fintech that is helping us to work in the customer journey, that they can sign e-signing, the client can sign electronically, allowing them to have the token that they sign. And we're doing that, and the regulator wanted us to have a specialist of e-signature. We're working on that. Let me talk about the scoring activity now. We collaborated, or we partnered with a fintech in France that helped us to build up the scoring model, the algorithm that helps us to be in position to segregate the clients, the good and potential good and bad payers, or those who can credit worthy clients, and this is working well for us. And I can also give the example of some other cases where we call on fintechs the conversation with our customers through WhatsApp. We have a good fintech in Cote d'Ivoire helping us to build up the way we can interact and engage with real-time engagement with our WhatsApp customers and all these activities. I can give you more examples. It's not our plan to do it internally because we need more internet bandwidth for that, but these are deliverables that we need on a short period of time before we move on a scale. So yes, in our activity as Orange Bank, regularly we have the opportunity to interact with fintechs. We do monitor them. And the last point I'd like to raise on this one before I yield back the floor is that the central bank, the BCAO, has also been active on the fintech agenda, because we have an observatory desk on the fintech that is open at the BCO, which is a good news for the regulators to know what is going on in this ecosystem. This also helps the fintech to be at the appropriate level, depending regarding the requirement of the central bank, the BCO. They are doing a good monitoring job on this fintech segment. This is something I'd like to also point out in our ecosystem. So wow.
Est-ce que, gérer un partenariat
To manage a partnership with fintech, it is complementary. Indeed, an institution like EcoBank try and accept to share at least a part of your data with these startups. How do you work with them so that they don't expose you to more risk when it comes to compliance? It's a very good question. I believe that first of all, we need to understand the importance of data. The future of our industry will be highly impacted by our ability to generate, store, and process and use data. The more digital we become, the more the data are the basis of all decisions that we make. It is of paramount importance with EcoBank because we are covering a very broad territory. We are present in more than 33 countries. We have access to an overwhelming number of data belonging to the customers. It gives us an opportunity, but better still, we need to assume responsibilities at two levels. The legal responsibility, because the regulators, majority of our markets, they do have laws and rules on how to deal with the data. We also have ethics responsibility. That is extremely important. Consumers trust us, giving us access to a number of information, and what we do with that information must be very responsible. First of all, what we did internally is we have a very high level governance framework based on the way we use the data. Secondly, as we work with the partners, do we comply with this framework? One. Secondly, the ethic and legal responsibilities, are we up to standard? Once these conditions are fulfilled, it now becomes a purely technological issue to deal with. One of the important bases we have is that we never give access to the customer. No, we never give access to data belonging to the customer. We may give access to anonymous data to build models and to be able to process this model. That's the first thing. Secondly, when it comes to the technological infrastructure, we have very strict access conditions. Data cannot come out of our infrastructure and be housed in other infrastructure we have no control over. Once we comply with all these conditions, the partnership when it comes to data becomes important. Secondly, still on the data, as the market develops, it will be extremely important to create an effective framework for exchange of data. We've been talking of various ecosystems, partnerships. I can use telcos data, fintech data. We need to have a framework where we can share this data to ensure, first of all, security. We need to comply with the conditions when it comes to the responsibility of the customer. The customer should not be, should not feel to be exposed. If we break trust, there are serious implications when it comes to digitalization. Are you sharing this data with private sector actors? No. there are some box centers that makes it possible for all the operators to get connected to the system. It could be through APIs, web servers, the various technologies that makes it possible to connect. Now, we've been talking about regulation a while ago. It should not just focus on the services only, because we are moving towards more digitalization. Regulation should also control data and what we do with this data. That is quite interesting. Taributiaf, you develop with Togocom the mobile money service that require partnership with a traditional bank. You was explaining to me when we were preparing this panel, in parallel there can be this type of partnership. How do you explain this? What kind of partnership you're dealing with? Dealing with mobile money, we have two main models: the business model, an operator that partners with a bank that holds the license to operate financial services via mobile channels. Second model, where an operator has a spin-off as RTL, where the operator is dissociated fully of his activity and start indulging in another activity, and he now becomes a financial actor. It started well. We call it Banque Centrée. The operator is an actor, a technical partner rather than commercial partner. He becomes a distributor of a product. What we observe today, given the vibrance of the market, the way the customers evolve, the evolution of the entire ecosystem, I mean the financial ecosystem, which is driven by the fintech, that model has limitations, simply because the banks, majority of the banks, still holding on to the traditional model, very limited when it comes to MFS activity, deposit, withdrawal and transfer. And yet the market is evolving towards other services: nano credit, insurance, interoperability, Pilponet, etc., etc. And so the financial services are evolving. I believe this model has limitations because we still holding on to the traditional practices. The central bank might want to review the legal framework, the regulatory framework of this activity. It might be possible that we revamp this model. What we observe as we speak, the new models on the market are very dynamic, very agile, driven both by the growth of the basis, growth of the needs, and the new services that are proposed by fintech. You might want to chop in and no? Okay. Thank you, Tariq. You still have the floor. The use of data to innovate, it's good, but we need to do it in a very sound environment. That's what you've been explaining ever since we started this panel. On your market in Cote d'Ivoire, with Orange Bank, the various regulations on the use of personal data, do they seem to be adequately clear, consistent as we speak? Yes, they are consistent. Let me draw your attention to my peers in this hall that this is the topic of the future. There are regulations on the protection of personal data that has to do with information, pedagogy. As far as I'm concerned, there will be coercion, practices that may not last. I'm not a regulator, but I've been listening to them, I've been seeing them. I mean, they will raise their voice in our countries on this topic in Cote d'Ivoire. The information phases started in 2013 through the promulgation of a law on the use of personal data, the state gave to LTCE, the regulator, that responsibility to ensure that businesses respected personal data. In 2013, 2016, not much happened. From 2016, we started receiving letters. I was the boss of the BNP branch in Cote d'Ivoire. We started receiving letters for visits and control. And so people started raising voices. Now, when we wanted to open Orange Bank, started activities in 2020, we needed to jump onto it and start working on the protection of personal data, because the central bank required our go ahead. And so we conducted a control mission. They encouraged us to seek assistance from a certified firm. And right after the commercial launching in November 2020, we had the agreement of IRTCE that authorized us to process personal data. We need to do it in accordance with the law. We had a specific terms of reference to do so. In other countries in the region, we intend to start our activities of Orange Bank in Senegal to start with. We do have started engaging with the commission responsible for the protection of personal data. And once we have the green light of the central bank, we need some time, because they know what we're doing in Cote d'Ivoire when it comes to protecting personal data. My message for you, that will be one of the topics of the future, because the regulators in each of the countries, they speak to each other. It is a requirement, globally speaking. There is a strong demand from the users. They want their data to be protected. We will feel more and more the regulators on these topics. Have you been surveying the environment in Senegal, in the entire sub-region, in countries that you want to start your activities? Can you see more or less the same roadmap, the same ambition, same environment, clearly speaking? Well, this is the third time I'm saying that the regulators have been speaking to each other. Indeed. Well, they want to raise up their standard globally, let alone regionally. The law of 2013 in Cote d'Ivoire that was in force was preceded by a law passed in 2008 in Senegal. And so they started dealing with this matter some years back. Their level of requirement will be equivalent. It's up to the operators who have been using data belonging to the customers, from the identification, biometrics, etc. It's up to the operators to live up to standards. Otherwise, we are running the risk of having some challenges with the regulators. Tariq, back to the issue of partnership.
Well, as operator, telco operator, mobile money operator, what could you learn from the fintech today? From the fintech, what we can learn is a synonym of thinking out of the box. Basically, innovation, agility. It's also learning from stakeholders that can adapt very quickly to changes on the markets. In a nutshell, this is what we can learn from the fintech, for the simple reason that these are startups, and without these mindsets, no startup can really have a headwinds on the market, which is a very dynamic market. So it is in this approach that the telcos came out a few years ago. The peculiarity of the telcos is that this ability to get adapted very quickly to how the market is evolving, adapted to the needs as well. And the fintech are going to bring another value more than what we've brought in as a telco industry a few years ago to the markets. And I must say that we cannot do without that. We have to work all together. And of course, there are so many issues regarding regulation that we need to work out. The confidentiality of the data, the KYC, and particularly on the total balance of this ecosystem. There are some shareholders behind, there are customers, there are employees, and of course, and we need to find the right balance, strike the right balance so that this ecosystem can move forward. Yes, you're talking about regulation. Do you think that the fintech and the mobile money operators, should they be submitted to the same regulation like the classical banks? No, I can see that in this perspective. We have the banks, they have their own ecosystem, and likely that they have the regulation in place that we think should be stringent. But this is very important, that a bank must have a good regulation, stringent regulation, so that we should not affect a segment of the market, but this also affects the economic issues that can jeopardize all the whole system if the bank is not prudent enough. Moreover, today the reality is such that the mass market is getting more and more close to the financial services, and we cannot just stand on a corporate approach managing the needs of the major population. So regulation today, in my opinion, must be reinvented. We must have the real stakeholders and strike the right balance so that we can maintain the economic growth, the fulfillment of the customers, and also particularly protecting the consumers and institutions that are also supporting us, as well as investors. Yes, I just want to really pick it from who he sat in. Let me take the example of Orange Bank in the digital bank activity, but we do give out loans, small loans, and those small loans on short maturity terms, and this is not the case of the classical banks. So for that matter, we are advocating for the regulation to be adapted to these digital activities. The BCAO, talking about the UMR space, the BCAO has engaged in reviewing the banking law that we have in place since say about more than 10 years now. The idea, since it's called on the banks, including the new stakeholders and the e-money issuers, so that we can come up with proposal to review the banking law as it stands now, so we can feel that the regulator wants to integrate in the new version of the banking law a few elements that are new that we did not have in place about 10 years ago, which is a good news.
So we can have regulators working on it. We don't have the latest version. Yes, we have your will. So to continue the line, it was a very sensitive subject for traditional banks. So most of the time you're well acquainted with new platforms. Have life changed the conception of things? When you say you, I think you're including all the actors. So let me start by saying, at the level of EcoBank as an institution, at the onset we were very open for partnership with various fintech. In his remark was talking about the fintech challenge, and we have a policy that's a very open one. We have a box that it help us be connected with the fintech and then make our services available. All the fintech you're talking about, be it Wave or MFS or others, even in Togo we have partners. And we're very open to negotiations and partnership with fintech in general. So let me talk about the subject of data. When we talk about regulation, the protection of data is very important, and the regulator needs to strengthen it. But apart from the control or the audit, we need to open clear opportunities to create data business. And this opportunity, unfortunately, in most of our markets does not exist, simply because the framework is not yet open, or it is very restrictive, and the regulator and the administration in general has a major role in this framework. Let me give you an example. Access to identification data of the client. When I want to open a banking account in countries where I have no access, I have no digital mean that is approved by a government that will allow me to confirm the identification of clients, allowing me to open an account. This kind of access is very, very important for us to develop a digital framework for data in general. So, do you see differences when we talk about oh, we have inequality requirement when we come to compliance? I will not talk about inequality in requirement. What I will say first is that the business, the type, and the importance that we are having in the market comes with requirements. So we have some fintech that started very lowly and are having some practices, and the regulator can close its eyes on it because it has no risk on the economy. But when they started getting big, they are called back to order. So there is that importance. We need, therefore, to balance the requirement of control with the need of flexibility for innovation. To my mind, by at the end of the day, technology comes as being important when we find the appropriate use. Most of the time, regulator needs to have that control, but as actor of economy, we need to work with the regulator and educate the regulator so that the new technologies might be accepted, and when it is accepted, it is part of the mainstream. Tariq, you want to say something? Yes, I want to add something on the KYC. I cannot say that there is a discrimination or different level of requirement from a sector to the other. I think it is the level of risk arising at the level of KYC. The more the risk actually we have a level of KYC that is needed, be it the telco, banks, and fintech. We also have knowing the client that differs from a sector to the other. Looking into the regulation at the level of KYC is actually virtually the same. We have other layers depending on the various risks. So this level of KYC is at a coherent level with various businesses. It can be improved with technology. And today, if we see in East Africa, we are compelled to participate in great KYC project talking about biometrics. Today, we can go towards new technology giving assurance to all actors, facial biometry, etc. So technology will come and improve this aspect and give assurance to all the actors. Okay, thank you. I think we have less than 3 or 4 minutes. I want to know something. Do you have questions in the public. If the public has something to say, do you have a question in the public? Yes, I think I'll give you my mic. Thank you very much. My name is Mathieu Eureka. I represent Upstick Limited. There is a technology company in the financial sector. I'm from Rwanda. So thank you for this panel, and we thank all the guests around the table. I would like to ask a question relating to the theme of the day, that is how to make sure that the prices of the financial services are reduced so that it might be compliant with what is proposed by the various fintech. And the question is asked to banks first, because there is a kind of contradiction. Let us start with this example. A fintech that comes and a service that is given at 3% by the bank, the fintech comes and talks about 1%, as we've seen recently. To get adapted to this, we have two means. First, go progressively, and when you say progressively, it means leaving all technologies that were at the bank each time you have new technologies. So we need much more investments. How? As banks. Please, this question is for our guest from EcoBank. How do you deal with it? How do you adapt yourself to the technology without multiplying investments and not being able to transfer the costs of the investment to the end users? Thanks. Your question is very direct, and I will do the same in my answer. Two items. First, the greatest regulator of prices is the market. Competition is open. We were giving the example of Wave coming on the market and then decide was compelled to reduce the prices of mobile money. And when the market is open, the various fintech are more and more active and in partnership with fintech, because most of our services is a partnership between banks and fintech. We succeed in reducing prices, and as banks we have the legacy system, meaning we have much more investment on in technology in the past, and because of the regulation we can have a huge system, and respecting the regulation has a cost. Being compliant has a cost, and it is felt in various services. What is important for banks is making or succeeding in finding the difference between the product of the end users that are technology driven and products that are financially sophisticated, and depending on the access and the segment on which we lay ourselves, we must adapt the price to the segment. What happens most of the time, having that we have a very rigid framework, I think as technology is in place, we will push the price for it to decrease. Thanks. I want to say something also. My colleague from Orange Money are not around. They would have liked to answer to this question comparing to Wave because you were doing the comparison when you started. When you arrived 10 years ago, we had no QR code. Uh, Launching real-time transfer was expensive. That was an investment, and I do agree with my colleague. And the distribution network is very expensive. And in Togo we have, in Cote d'Ivoire we have 40,000 point of sales, and we have intermediaries or brokers to be paid, and we it was difficult to uh, find the right price. It is the market that will decide on the price, and we must know that the huge investment for us to take a taxi, go to the station and give 10,000 to the driver to go and give it to our parents in the village. So it is a kind of luxury that deserves to be paid. So when we talk about the pricing, each and everyone must be aware that we are not giving just prices just like that. We have various factors that do justify the level at which we are, but technology can make it be in favor of the clients. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to cut short this discussion so we can continue later when we meet. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Now we are going to invite the next panel on COP27. What are the lessons for various institutions? Thank you.